Did you know that there are currently 18 million military veterans in the United States? But for many of these brave men and women, their service comes at a steep cost. When they return to civilian life, they often face significant challenges, such as physical and mental health issues and social isolation. Shockingly, every single day, 20 veterans die by suicide. Join Pocan Joe as he discusses Junkyard Joe from Image Comics, a poignant and authentic portrayal of the veteran experience and a reminder that our veterans deserve our help. Welcome to Comic Book Storytime.
All right, so Junkyard Joe, if you haven't read the story yet, let me give you a quick synopsis of what we're at. We're only 4 issues into this, and this is why this story is so just magnificent to me, and I want to share that with you. We go back in time in the Wayback Machine to Vietnam. We got a young gentleman by the name of Muddy Waters, more than likely drafted in a war that he probably didn't volunteer for. We get this really cool kind of scene where this new guy kind of joins his unit, but he's quiet, and then all of a sudden, surprise, it's a robot, which kind of makes sense, right? Because it doesn't talk and it's got this dead stare all the time. That's what we call foreshadowing. So as they go on their first mission, they get ambushed. Worst case scenario, everybody dies except for Muddy. He gets mortally wounded. His first trauma. And that's going to be another key moment right there. And then, of course, the robot has built some sort of bond with these people, even though he doesn't speak. He saves his friend's life. And then he's like, nah, I think I'm going to go get these guys, goes to a village. And this is where our first trauma for Junkyard Joe happens, which is very significant. He ends up killing a small child, as well as setting the village on fire. Just some of the most horrendous things you can do in combat. And then we get the big, okay, it was all a dream. Muddy goes on, writes a comic strip for 47 years straight, not missing a single day. That's going to be another key later. Junkyard Joe shows back up, comes find out it wasn't all in his imagination. And then Junkyard Joe starts showing some real weird symptoms. Eventually, they get help, and the story kind of leaves us there only at issue 4. Why is this story so significant, and why do I think every veteran should read this story? It kind of really shines a light on PTSD as a whole, post-traumatic stress syndrome. So I want to start off, before we get too deep in this, I am not a therapist. I am a counselor of sorts. I have a focus in counseling and human services. I work with veterans throughout the American Legion, VFW, Elite Forces Foundation, and other various organizations out here. And I've spoken on this particular topic a lot throughout my life, getting out of the military myself. So why is this story so significant? So PTSD is generally brought on by some sort of trauma that's enhanced. Now I'm using the word PTSD. I'm not talking about CPTSD, complex PTSD. We're not talking about that today. We're just going to kind of focus on PTSD as a whole. So why is this so important? Normally in a comic book, when you get these kind of scenes of what post-traumatic stress syndrome looks like, we get these extremely exaggerated, over the top, right? Going for a gun because a car backfired, or murdering, mafia members because they killed your family in a park, right? Like Punisher or Rambo, right? Where he just loses his shit on an entire town of people. And what we do is when we read these kind of stories, we get so enthralled with the action of PTSD that we think that there has to be some sort of truth or that it's based off something as a whole. And the fact is Junkyard Joe proves it the more realistic case of it than anything else. In the other stories that I mentioned, the hero, anti-hero, always kind of just wants to be left alone, and then there's that one thing that kind of pushes him over the edge. It kind of forces him into this situation that everybody thinks is PTSD. The fact is all the stuff prior, before losing their shit, is the actual PTSD. Once you lose rage and you move forward and you start losing your mind, killing everybody, you're past the PTS phase. You are on a whole nother level there. So to bring this back around to Junkyard Joe, Muddy Waters gets out of the military. He survives Vietnam. Horrendous tragedy happened to him. He almost dies, and he's being convinced that he's actually okay and that what happened to him didn't really happen to him, or he's missing it wrong. And this obviously puts a lot of strain on him. After 47 years of being back with his wife and working on the comic book, he loses his wife. Trauma number 2 to this. And in the comic book, expressly kind of shows us that now these things are starting to come back up. He doesn't have his escape. He was kind of a loner, too. He just kind of worked at home, did his comic book, did his own thing, was super happy just with the simplistic life of being with his wife. And in my romantic naiveness, I would like to think that's every veteran's kind of just, let's live that normal life. So, given this traumatic experience, and then again, another one, the only person that he ever really was around all the time, that he enjoyed being around, this obviously brings up feelings, and then those symptoms and those signs start coming out very early in the comic book, waking up in cold sweats with nightmares, flashbacks, memories, something that's very often called pause and remember. You may have seen a veteran do this before. They'll just kind of, something catches their eye and they just kind of stare at it and go silent, right? It's capturing a memory, good or bad, doesn't really matter. It's just something that I know veterans do. And again, I'm only speaking to veterans at this point. So all this kind of happens, and then the most amazing thing happened. One of his war buddies comes up with him, and it's Junkyard Joe. And obviously, he's been put through the ringer. Now, there's a bunch of comic book story with this as well. Of course, he's being chased. There's a whole family that just moved in next door that just recently lost a tragedy of their wife, or the mother, wife kind of scenario there. So there is a heart engaging story with it too, which I really think brings this home. And then there's that comic book element of the evil coming, right? But back to the preface of this story. Meets it back up with his buddy Muddy Waters, and immediately we start noticing this kind of weird ticks that are going on with a robot. And I love the aspect of Junkyard Joe being a robot suffering from this stuff. So we see him doing these kind of weird things where he's like cleaning and trying to get into some sort of routine, some sort of normacy is generally what it's called. And even Muddy kind of noticed these behaviors too, right? This is kind of out of sorts. He just wants to be, well, useful, right? He wants to have purpose. I don't think anybody would want to have that to some degree and not just be a burden on somebody. So, of course, Muddy sees this, and he does the most important thing ever that you could possibly do. He doesn't go out drinking with him or take him to strip clubs or anything ridiculous like that. He takes him to VA to talk to somebody in the story. And I thought that was very important, right? Regardless of your feelings of the Veterans Affairs, hospitals, or whatever the case may be, thinking that you can take care of somebody that's suffering for something, even if you're suffering from it yourself, is generally not a good idea. I have the saying, and I hope that it doesn't offend anybody, crazy can't fix crazy. And I don't mean that in a clinical sense, but again, I'm just trying to shed light on it. If you're suffering from something, generally everybody's like, hey, I need to help the person, let them know I'm going through the same thing. Let me tell you what I'm doing. The fact of the matter is, and our story shows us this, these two people aren't built the same. They're not made the same. They're both programmed differently. You have a draftee that went into Vietnam who wasn't there to do what I like to call warrior shit. He was chosen. He had to go do it, and God bless him for his service for going to do it. Then you have something that was literally built. You can even say it volunteered. It was programmed to do these things. And yes, even though their traumas were different, it amazes me how we can still see the similarities between the two and how they both function. A man that works 47 years consistently with that ritual, constantly working on something. And then we see the robot with the dead stare in the comic book. I love it when they do the close-ups of him, because you see a robot, right? And you know it's a robot, but it's just got that 1,000-yard stare that you can't help but notice in the story. And I think it's very powerful, very engaging to see that. So we have two people, different traumas, different types of service. One was literally made to do warrior shit, and the other one just got stuck into doing warrior shit. Both suffer from the same diagnosis, and I use air quotes not to be offensive in this one, but it always amazes me, even with some counselors and even some therapists out there. They're like, oh, well, you didn't almost die in combat, so we're just going to call it anxiety. Right? It kind of turns into that kind of mushy scenario. These are extremely poor therapists, I would say. Not somebody I would bother listening to. And the engagement of the two people and how they can function in this type of situation is just absolutely mind-blowing to me, that nobody else has thought to do this in a comic book. And if they do, they obviously will make it something like two different genders or two different races or two whatever the case may be. None of that's important in this story. The race, color, creed, religions, all this other stuff doesn't matter. Warriors do warrior shit, and different warriors do different warrior shit in this. It's about what you actually do and function as. And I think that's a beautiful tale that needs to be told. And again, I can relate this back to the military, where you got the infantry guy that's out there running and gunning, right? And then you got the poor guy that works at a motor pool, right? And then you're like, well, one's obviously going to get PTSD a lot easier, right? And you point to the infantry guy, not thinking about the poor guy working in the motor pool that's dunking mortar rounds that are coming into the base, or goes out on a convoy to recover a vehicle and gets caught up in an ambush. Like, he's not trained to deal with that. Yes, there is some training, but the trainings are different, right? Back to our comic book, we got a robot. It's literally a walking death machine. And then we got a guy with the basic training for like a short period of time and then was thrown in the jungle. So I loved that story, that you can have these two different types of people, both doing warrior shit as best they can, and then both getting caught up with the same symptoms, the same syndrome, if you will, and still knowing that they can't do it on their own and that they need to go get help. The beautiful thing about this is, even though our veterans that are walking out there that have diagnosed PTSD or non-diagnosed PTSD, they still have to interact with the world. And it probably is just shades of gray to them. When you see these other things, right, it's very easy to say, oh, I know death. Tell this kid, suck it up or whatever. The cut to the chase, past the emotion. That's really what the veterans often do in both real life and most comic books, right? You cut past the emotion because that's just messy, sticky stuff. Nobody wants to deal with the messy, sticky stuff. I think that's an interesting aspect of the story. And then, of course, the threat that's coming. That's nothing more than a metaphorical when the other shoe drops. People that are high anxiety, high risk, high amounts of tension in their lives generally are waiting for that, next bad thing to fall, right? A veteran that always keeps a gun under his pillow, that's waiting for that next big bad thing to come, the next shoe to drop. I've never known one to actually do that, but I know that when somebody's heard that out there before. The whole story to me is just PTSD in a nutshell. It happened to function in a world, even in its extreme levels, even with the sticky ickiness of people's feelings and emotion, and being able to function in some sort of way in all that mess at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that's why it's my favorite read thus far that has come out. I'm excited about when the more comic book woo-woo stuff happens and how exciting that will be. So one of the things that I can relate most to this story overall is one, I was a veteran. Right? Did 17 and a half years before I was medically retired. I was forced out over past injuries and then finally ending it in a current injury. Outside of Ramada, IED went off. Vehicle flipped over, crushed both of my hips, killed my gunner, killed our interpreter. Eventually, the driver ended up passing away. And I know this sounds like, oh my God, this is traumatic. You must have PTSD. I actually don't have PTSD over the trauma that actually happened. And I've never been diagnosed with PTSD. I want to make that clear. I work with veterans that have PTSD on a regular basis. And majority of the time, I'm just like, hey, you need to go here for help, or you need to go there for help. I don't act like a therapist in any way. The biggest regret that I have in my entire military career is the reason why we were in those vehicles to begin with was because of my ego and me doing warrior shit, or what I thought to be warrior shit at the time. So in Ramada, very susceptible to sandstorms. One day there was a sandstorm, but there was also a call for us to go back up an MP unit that was in a village in Ramada, and they were taking fire. The mission was jump in the chalks and head out and air assault it, or rappel from a helicopter. I'm sorry. But all the chalks were helicopters. They were grounded. They couldn't fly. So the call came down for me to either wait to see if the sandstorm passes or jump in vehicles and go. I chose to go. That was my call for me and my team, and I made that call. And to this day, I still regret that call. Like, I still like that was on me, and were just the ones that were injured in my vehicle. Turns out the whole mission was just a shitstorm to begin with. We ended up, well, not me so much, about 3 fires from my 9mm before I pretty much just bled out and passed out during the ambush that happened. And luckily, we were able to get out of the situation. I didn't wake up until I was in Germany. I was out quite a bit of time. To this day, again, I still think about that moment. I can relate to this comic book because, right, they think about those times and those injuries, right? And I still wear my scars today, along with various other scars. But that was probably the most traumatic, and that's ultimately what ended up in my military career. And I still regret that to this day. And I still think about it. Now, I've learned to live with it, and I've learned my coping mechanisms. And much like our characters inside of our comic book here, who need that routine thing, that other thing to do, I'll be honest with you, that's what brought on the evil lair. I like making things. I'm really good at inventing and making things. I love taking measurements. I love creating things, even if I'm not good at it. I just like to stay busy. So yeah, reading Junkyard Joe for me, that's probably why you have the evil lair today.
If you are a veteran in need of assistance, please contact the Veterans Crisis Line. Just dial 988, then press 1. Thank you for watching this third episode of Comic Book Storytime. We hope you've enjoyed it. Check out Pocan Joe on YouTube, both at Evil Lair Projects Builds and Pocan Joe on YouTube. If you have any opinions about this story given today, please comment below. Thank you as always for watching.